So this session is about integration, and the basic question we're asking is how do we talk about integration and how can we shape integration? And we've got three very important panelists. Their names are in the programme. Pete Mandaville is there, Rabiha Hannan is here, she's the Trustee of New Horizons, Sunder Katwala from British Future. Their bios are all in the programme, so I'm not going to spend, it's a very short session, not going to spend too long reading from the bios. But trust me, they're very competent and important people in the context of this discussion. I'm going to ask each of them to say something, starting with Sunder, then Pete, then Rabia, a minute or two, just to give us some food for thought.
Thanks, Dilwar. It's very good to be here. British Future's an independent think tank that tries to talk about issues of identity, integration, immigration, opportunity in a way that brings people together, and it's important to us to work with New Horizons, and the space you're opening up at events like this, I think, matters a lot. Why does integration matter? For me, it's obvious that we're a more fragmented, anxious, polarised and divided country than any of us would want to be. I'm keen to say the glass is also half full and there are good things going on, but we don't need to, post-Brexit and post-Trump, work very hard to say, the world feels more anxious and polarised. We want integration to be an everybody issue. It's about a common citizenship, what it means to be a citizen of our society. We want it to feel fair and equitable. We make the same demands, we have the same responsibilities, whatever your ethnic status, faith background, and so on. I think for British Muslims, it often feels as if very much at the sharp end of the integration debate. It doesn't feel very equitable. It feels very much pushed upon as something of a burden to always be at the sharp end. But I think this session can also be about what do you want to do with that, about that, how can other people help you to do that. You might get a bit of a break with Brexit and the left behind and other issues of integration, but often we have a very them and us debate about British Muslims in particular. But why does that happen? For me, the fundamental integration question is, how do people become us? And I think that's a good question to ask in societies of migration and high levels of migration, because when we say it's a two-way street, it's right that if you come as a migrant to a country, there are things you need to do to make it work, to learn the language, to fit into the community. There are things the society you join needs to do for you. It needs to give you a fair shot. It needs to reduce discrimination. It needs to treat you and your children as fully part of the society. So it's a good question to ask. And societies where you can never become us probably find immigration a taboo. It's very hard to become Japanese if you weren't Japanese. It's possible, I think, to become British, wherever your parents came from. But how do people become us becomes a much more difficult question for the second and third generation people who are British born. If like me, your parents came to this country, mine from India and Ireland, and the question is still, how do people become us? I'm thinking, why is that still the question? What's going on here? So it becomes harder. So I think that's one of the issues. But I think the reason we can't duck, the reason we talk about Muslim integration differently in a way we want to move on from is because it feels different. It feels different, I think, to British Muslims, and it feels different to the broader society. My experience of this country from the age of 10 to my early 40s is we came a long way. We made a lot of progress on issues of race and prejudice and identity and integration. The question of, could you be black and British, Asian and British, that was very up for grabs when I was an 11-year-old. We came a long way. I think if I was British Muslim, I'm basically an Irish Catholic because of my mum, but if I was British Muslim, I'd be a bit more sceptical about whether we've made quite as much progress because it feels sharper. And so we have an Islam, I think, that, thanks to the work you're doing, is increasingly confident of its place, its standing, its role, its roots in this society. But everyone here knows that's work in progress and there's more to do. And we don't have a British society entirely confident of the full presence and contribution of Muslims. So it does feel different. Are we given the same treatment or are we asked to jump extra hurdles? And, the question in a way if you look at groups who are sort of differentiating now, playing good minority, bad minority, and saying other groups have integrated, why won't you take the same deal? There's a bit of a standoff there. So I think our shared ambition is to unlock the full contribution of British Muslims, 3 million people, our largest faith minority, a third of the ethnic minorities, lots of white Muslims as well, our youngest group in our society, half under their mid-20s. It's a very different picture to the rest of society, and our most under pressure group because of the media, because of politics, because of international extremism and so on. How do we unlock that potential together and get away from the them and us debate? Let me just put 3 questions to the room and the conversation. I think there's a question for government, which is, we've got a lot of integration rhetoric in our country. I think we need an integration strategy, a plan for integration. We've never had one. But what's a constructive, fair, even-handed plan for integration? The person in charge of that is the Secretary of State for Communities. He's got to respond to the Casey Review, Sajid Javid. So it's quite interesting that just by chance, because of a reshuffle, a man with certainly some Muslim identity and Muslim heritage has been put in charge of working out what our integration plan is. Will we actually have an integration strategy in this country for the first time? My second question is to sort of, in a sense, to British Muslims themselves and to those of us who want to be on the side of the voices for integration, the voices of the common good. How do we shift the share of voice to the voices who are working for the common good and the common ground? What I'd like to see happen is a generational and a gender shift in who we hear from and why, just so it reflects the reality of the society we've got. But what are people who are trying to do that? What support do they need? How can we make that happen? It's obviously quite easy to get on the radio if you want to rant at everybody about everything. It's quite hard, I think, if you're in the constructive, nuanced space. We've got to get those voices heard. And then a challenge, I think, for Muslim citizens and communities themselves, which is actually the relationship with society is going to be very plural. 3 million people don't think all the same, but the relationship with government and politics is broken at the moment. How do we want to fix that? There are 2 models of that don't work. If you go back 20 years, the Muslim Council of Britain would have said, come to us, we'll represent anybody, that's all you need to know, we'll be the gatekeeper. And for good and bad reasons of whatever type, the government isn't going to buy that at the moment, but I bet a lot of people who are British Muslim wouldn't buy that either. Another model that won't work is government will say, well, we don't like some of the people who want to talk to us, we'll invent the people we want to talk to and just talk to them, and then we'll say we're doing that. Well, it's tried from time to time, you know why people try it. It's obviously not going to work. So how are we going to fix it in a way that reflects the pluralism, brings through the different voices? It's obviously easier if you're government and you want to talk to faith groups. If there are, hierarchical Christian churches like the Church of England and the Roman Catholic Church are easier to deal with than black churches that are less hierarchical. The Jewish community is quite plural, but decides to organise itself. So I'm all for let 1,000 flowers bloom, but actually, how do communities want to organise themselves for influence and to actually recognise their pluralism in order to get heard by the broader society and by the government of the country?
Thank you, sir.
So I want to speak for a moment about how this question looks from the context of the United States right now, and then briefly and by kind of commenting a bit on how that compares with some trends here over the course of the last 20 years. I think the problem that we're experiencing right now within American Muslim communities would actually more accurately be described as a problem of American Muslims becoming progressively disintegrated. In American Muslim communities, since their arrival in significant numbers in the United States, and I'm talking about immigrant Muslim families in the United States since the 1960s, had tended to be more integrated, to have higher levels of educational and economic and professional attainment, and that's just a story of the very different circumstances of the immigrant Muslim experience when compared to the UK and Europe. And so Muslims, by and large, just weren't really noticed, and certainly were not noticed as Muslims. They kind of got on with their business. And I think it's worried me most about the last few years has been the upsurge in a very different type of anti-Muslim sentiment and Islamophobia. Islamophobia is a term I'm still a little iffy about, but a sense in certain segments of American society that Islam is in some sense posing an existential threat to the American way of life, whatever that might be. And you see this in the sort of well-funded, to the tune of $58 million Islamophobia industry that has grown up around the activities of people like Pamela Geller and Frank Gaffney, people who incidentally had the ear of and are known to be influential with figures that are sitting just 5 feet away from the President of the United States right now. People like Steve Bannon, Sebastian Gorka, Stephen Miller, who posit the idea that Muslims in the United States are engaged in some grand plot to sort of erode the rule of law as it's understood in the Constitution of the United States to be replaced by Sharia. And I mean, on the face of it, to anyone who understands what Sharia is and understands anything about these communities, that idea is, of course, absolutely preposterous, right? And so the mystery then is, how is it that a fairly well-educated population, such as Americans are, come to be able to believe? This is not a majority opinion. This is still, relatively speaking, a fringe sentiment in the United States, but it's one that is expansionist. It is one where you see shades and versions of it kind of reaching further and wider. And most dangerously, I think it's one that has some entree into the White House right now. And the effect that it's having, I think, and this is what I'm sort of thematizing as the disintegration of American Muslims, is to cause American Muslims, who are obviously more than just Muslims, many of them are Arab Americans, they're lawyers, they're engineers, they're social conservatives, frankly, many of them. They're not allowed to be these things anymore. They're detethered from all of these other identities and fixed and understood and gazed at by the state to some extent as Muslims, and understood by reference exclusively to their religious identity. And this is the sort of challenge that faces us. And in the sense that this is a teaser for my longer talk tomorrow, I'll be talking about what that state of affairs might look like going forward, and how might we, in that tragedy, in a sense, recover the possibility of a different kind of politics.
Rabiha.
Thank you very much. So, as a New Horizons representative, I'll start with that, really. The vision of New Horizons is really to build a society where the relations between Muslims and the people around us is strong and is healthy. But not just that. To take it to a place where Muslims feel that they are strongly rooted in the British context, so that we're not seen as, we don't stand out like a sore thumb. We don't stand out for all the wrong reasons, but we're seen as something that is positive and constructive for the society that we're in. We're not necessarily there yet, and the reasons for that I will talk about later on. But I think, for me, I wanted to sort of bring forth a story that really just epitomizes the sort of challenges that I think that we have with integration today. The people that sort of know us, especially as trustees, Dawar, myself, Navid, we've been involved in sort of community cohesion work and sort of bridge building initiatives probably for the last sort of 20 years. So we've worked quite hard at trying to sort of bring people together, to try and create opportunities for understanding and getting to know people. So I was doubly sort of surprised when, quite accidentally, I've sort of come across some builders that we were trying to get some work done in our house. We wanted an extension done. This is last year. And I'd managed to find this, what seemed like a really reliable company online. And this lovely man called Gary sort of came to our door and sat with me for a long time, sort of explaining how he put this extension together for us, what it would look like and what have you. And then would come back the next day and actually show us the plans for this extension. And we had a lovely chat, we had a tea, we sat down together, it was lovely. The next day he came back and he said, look, I don't mind saying this, but my wife was asking me, who was it, who's this, who are these people that you're going to be working with? And he said, I'm not entirely sure, because they're really nice, but I think they're Muslim. And for him, the two was really difficult to put together. And the work went on. He did an absolutely fantastic job. I cannot explain to you how brilliant this guy was with us. He was a man of huge integrity, You know, just he couldn't do enough to try and meet our requirements with extension on a very limited sort of budget. And after about sort of 6 months worth of working on these plans and what have you, he came back to sort of sort out the sort of final things. And at this time, we sort of made, you know, quite good sort of friendships in the process. And he says to us that, look, Robbie, I hope you don't mind me saying this, you know, and I couldn't say this the first time I sort of met you. But, you know, I come from an area that I don't actually meet a lot of Muslims. But the Muslims that I have met haven't really been very good people. And because of that, you know, I'm surrounded by people that are supporters of, you know, sometimes right-wing groups, but, you know, commonly UKIP and other organisations that really don't understand you. So I'm telling them now that, you know, I'm working with these, and I'm actually embarrassed to tell some of them that I'm working with Muslims because they will really look down at it. But, you know, if I had not met you a year ago, I can honestly tell you that after 9/11 and 7/7, all these awful atrocities were happening around the world. If someone had given me a button to press, that meant I could obliterate all the Muslims on earth, I would have pressed it. And that for me was really quite shocking, because this is a really lovely guy. This isn't one of these, you know, sort of mythical creatures that are out there to sort of get Muslims in any which shape or form that they can. This is someone really genuine and a really good person. But his perception of Islam, his perception of Muslims was something other than what he clearly felt when he met us. So I just wanted to sort of put that out.
Thank you very much, and I think that represents for us the reality of the challenge that we have when we're talking about integration. So I'm going to, I'm going to throw it out to the audience very, very shortly, but before that, I just wanted to ask the panel a very quick question, really, and it's to delve a little bit deeper into the challenges. I mean, there's many different levels of challenges. Let's just look at two for the moment. Because this is a British Islam conference, let's think, what are the religious theological challenges? Are there any, and what are they? And I'm not going to, you know, expect an exhaustive list, but just food for thought and sparking off ideas. But also, what are the political challenges? So in a way, two sides of the same coin.
But it does seem to me there is a problem in the reception by people like Gary the Builder of the message, oh, by the way, this has got nothing to do with Islam. Out there, people are thinking, well, it obviously thinks it's got something to do with it, so you need to disown it and own it in a different way. And I think some of the supportive voices out there, you know, the Guardian newspaper, you know, liberal sort of allies were saying, you know, don't pick on the Muslims, saying, why are we even asking Muslims to have anything to say about this at all? Is to totally miss the mark. Actually, that there needs to be a very, very clear account, actually, of a faithful tradition that is from here, that is of here, that knows that that isn't incompatible and has things to say and to challenge for people who want to say it isn't. Because the big point that's been made about sort of Trump and Steve Bannon and so on is, you know, we know that extremisms are symbiotic. They need each other. It's not a surprise that the EDL and El Majhoun and Anjem Trouty sort of grew up together in the same Luton playground, and they managed to split a place like that. And I think the challenge you've got in the States is that people are doing that. So what's the antidote? You know, we just heard very strongly why contact is the antidote, but contact mostly gets the people who want to come, but the people who don't need to come. So we really need to think about, that's the social challenge. How do we get the contact for the people who are a bit fearful, actually, to start crossing the boundaries?
Thank you. Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the religious front, particularly, two key problems. One is the question of how does one articulate a confident British Muslim identity that is does not hesitate to claim a religious specificity for itself and within certain parameters specific rights for itself, while at the same time in the context of a pluralistic society like Britain also to coexist with and be able to live alongside others with different value systems, ethical commitments, lifestyles, etc., etc., etc. I mean, there have been a number of intellectual projects that have sought to kind of create that contextualized approach to religion, but I feel that many of them have fail to gain much traction within broader Muslim communities, often I think because they're highly intellectual elite contexts that don't translate well into experiences on the street. And second, within Muslim communities, I think the need to navigate through and get beyond the politics of authority and authenticity, in the sense of feeling comfortable with the idea that there's not a single uniquely authoritative point of religious legitimacy or authenticity. To get away from questioning whether Deobandi, Barelvi, Sufi, Salafi, Ikhwani, Madhabi, get beyond this and recognize the ability to live within a complex and pluralistic terrain of multiple legitimate interpretations of the tradition itself.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're faced with lots of challenges. I think there's lots of reasons behind that. And I think one of them, for me, I'm going to try and address it from sort of both fronts, really. But one, I think wider society sometimes oversimplifies the situation around women, around Muslims, by seeing us almost as one sort of monolithic block. And that really does complicate and make things difficult for us to sort of say, well, actually, look, there's all these different nuances. Are you not sort of seeing who we are? Are you not seeing the difference that we do make to try and, integrate? But also we have to recognise that people have come to this country at different times. They have different levels of education. They have different economic situations. They have different social situations. They are faced with different cultural values. All of these different layers will affect your ability to integrate with society. Sometimes in a positive way, and sometimes in a not so positive way. So I think recognizing the complexity of the situation does something for us to try and understand it better and explore it better. The other side of it for me is where Muslims are at, and often, sadly, is that they are in a bit of a rut, and it's all about what other people can do to make our integration process better. So it's never admitting to ourselves that actually we have got lots of problems. So it becomes something that, that we fall into the trap, and I know it's already been mentioned, of this victimhood sort of mentality. It's all about Islamophobia. I know you were hesitant to sort of use the word, but it's all about, people pointing the finger at us and people wanting to sort of isolate us. And I know Karen touched upon this morning, this idea that when you feel that your religion or your identity is under attack, it's almost a natural mechanism to sort of almost draw inwardly and protect your own and build up your guards and not want to wash your dirty linen out in public. But I don't feel that we can do that anymore. For us to move forward, for us to be constructive about building the narrative of integration, then we have to be honest and open about what those real problems are. We have to recognise that there are certain links within our community, and as a New Horizons person, as a Muslim, this is where our focus essentially is. That we have to recognise that there are divisive narratives out there which close and limit people's understanding and perception of Islam and its way of dealing with society. And we have to have the confidence to be able to call it out when we see it. So if we see cultures that do not understand gender inequality, or perhaps use scriptures to reinforce it in the form of practices such as, domestic abuse, or forced marriage, or FGM, then we need to have the confidence to say, actually, that's a problem, and why it's a problem. And what we try and do with New Horizons is push forward this understanding that we can have theological discussions that can take us out of the darkness. But unless we recognise we have problems and that we're making mistakes ourselves, we'll never be in a position to be able to embrace that and make changes for the better.